game between Fabiano Caruana and Lazaro Bruzon from the US Championship from round 1. We had Rui Lopez in the opening, and Bruzon went for Berlin, but Fabi answered with anti-Berlin. He didn't want to get into this famous Berlin ending, which would be something like this. And then I think bishop g5, knight c3, h3, and it gets really boring really fast. He wanted to play something more, not solid, but less searched, less explored. He went for d3, and Bruzon answered bishop c5, bishop g5, and he went back. And now Fabi played knight c3. In this position, it was also possible to capture on c6 and capture this pawn on e5, but after knight e4, black would regain this pawn. And if bishop e7, it takes, white can take on c6 actually here. And after e4, you do not capture on e4 because you would force an exchange of queens, and I think this is slightly better for white because of the structure. Double pawns on the c file, and this ending would be slightly more pleasant for white. Instead, black should play queen b4, and after knight d2, because queen d2, let's show it. Queen d2 is bad because of queen takes b2, and now the rook is in trouble, because if something like queen c3 goes, then black has queen c1, and on king e2, bishop a6 is possible. And on king f3, you simply take the rook. And if queen c6, that's nothing because of king e7. So knight d2 is the move, but here bishop a6 leads to a really balanced game because white has extra pawn, but he cannot castle, so that's kind of a compensation for that material advantage. In the game, Caruana played knight c3, and now black is being very solid. He's playing this fielder structure with d6, and now white wastes the tempo with d3 and d4, but I think in this position it doesn't matter at all, because the position is quite closed, and you can get easier with you can get off easier with losing tempo in such positions. He plays bishop d7 because now if he takes, now the e4 pawn is hanging, so basically e5 is traded for e4. He goes for bishop g3 here, which idea is to provoke releasing the tension, to capture on d4 somehow, which is done. Knight d4, and after castles, Fabiano plays a weird move, at least to me. It's knight b3. I think it's better to just capture on c6, and after bc go back, and white would have a slight advantage, I think, because of this relatively ruined structure on the queen side. And it's not like I gave a bishop pair for it with bishop c6. This would be a different story, because now black has a bishop pair and at least he has some compensation. But in this case, he preserved his bishop pair and he still got the better structure, so I would give better chances to white here. He plays knight b3. And now black just consolidates pretty easily with a6, bishop e2, g8. And now a typical plan in these positions. is to expand on the queen side with b5 and also to put some pressure on the e4 pawn. And that's why Fabiano plays f3 here. Just to mention, if white tries something like a3, then the other plan goes knight e5, and next moves should be c6, queen c7, and or even c5 with queen c7, and trying to prepare somehow this d5 break in the center. Instead, he plays f3, and now we have b4, knight d5. Slightly more passive is knight d1 here, but I think it was better to play this because, let's say, if black plays knight h5, bishop f2, bishop g5, white can play bishop e3, and he's passive, but he can hold this position. Slightly worse, but it's holdable. Instead, he went for something more active, let's say. Knight d5, and now he takes with the e-pawn. Here, queen d5 was better, but even that is not really good for white. Black is still better. Something like this would happen, and after a5, this position looks very scary for white, because black's plan is quite easy. He wants to play a3 and to open up the position with b3 next. So white would have to be really careful not to get under some attack. Instead, he plays e d5, and now his idea is simple. If knight moves away, then queen takes b4. But black has a nice intermediate move, which is bishop g5, and the point is that after f4, which is played in the game, black has bishop g4, attacking the bishop and using the fact that the king is still on the pin, in the pin. White has to go back to c1 and now retreats, because now this knight is not for grabs, because bishop b2 would come, and the rook is hanging because if you move it, then bishop c3 is happening. So Fabi castled, and now after this, knight e7, now black is simply better because white is quite overextended. He pushed f4, e3 is weakened, so this position is not ideal for white to defend. And now I think that black made a significant mistake, which made his advantage drop a lot. He took on c3 immediately. Instead, I think that rook b8, with the idea of doubling his heavy pieces on the b file, was a much better solution. For example, if he plays rook f1, you just double on the b file, provoke b3, and after rook d4, queen e2, I think that here black is significantly better, but still, it's not anything decisive. It's just that d5 pawn is weak. His pieces are actively placed, so that makes a difference. Instead, he played bishop c3. He traded bishop for a knight, which is in general, in these types of situation, a good decision. But here it seems like it's premature. It seems like this bishop on f6 was quite dominant, and with rook b8, he would still have that option of capturing the knight. But okay, he played bishop c3, bc, because queen has to guard d5 pawn, bc, and now queen d7. Trying to connect rooks, and also maybe to jump with queen a4 into white's camp. White plays c4, trying to protect his pawn, and now he plays knight f5. Here I think it was better to do it other way. Queen f5 with knight g6, h5, h4, and trying to kick this bishop from g3. So you could have a better attack on f4. Knight f5, bishop f2, and now rook e4, trying to double on the e file, also doing it with tempo on the rook. Rook a e8 now, and because if rook c4 happens, g4, 97, and queen e2 would happen, and there would be a double attack on the knight and on the rook. So he plays rook a e8, g3. Here it was a chance for white to get a draw, a forced draw. Not a forced draw, but let's check some variations. Rook e1, and now if he captures here, queen e1, this ending is approximately equal, but I would still give better chances to black because his weaknesses are much easier to exploit. Queen can get to a4 anytime, and c4, f4, king is a bit exposed, so I would give black slightly better chances. But also white has a potential target in this c7 pawn or a6, so it is balanced, but... And if rook c4 happens, rook c4 happens, then g4, and like I said before in the previous variation, after 97, queen e2, and now we have a double attack again on the rook on c4 and knight on e7. And now the only way to save the game is to give up this knight, and after queen g4, the perpetual check would appear, because let's say he goes king h1, I give a check. If he goes to f1, I give a check on h3, because he cannot escape to e2 because of this checkmate. And also, if bishop g3 is played, then black just sacrifices his rook, and he just gives checks on f3 and h3. That's it. Instead, he played g3, and now black took a pawn on c4, and after a couple of moves, black ended up with the extra pawn, but white has now white has enough compensation because he has an open e file, and also it's not easy to use this extra pawn because this d5 pawn is really nicely holding those two pawns. Rook b1 is played, f6, and now this rook on a4 looks quite misplaced. So now black changes plans. He wants to attack somehow this d5 pawn, but white also has his counter chance on the c7 pawn. And after rook a5, they just swap d5 for c7, and the material gets so reduced that it's not easy to continue playing for a win here. And after a couple of more moves, they exchange queens. And now this bishop b6 is very, very important. And now they just repeat moves with knight c6, rook c7, and go back and forth. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and see you later.